Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. We are excited today. We have Liz Hartke joining us from Wisconsin. So, Liz, thanks so much for joining us. Lord, my head is like exploding today. How are you, Liz?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And I know you have such a wealth of knowledge that I am just so excited to jump into and learn more about you. And before we get there, let's take a second and just thank our audience for chiming in today. We know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to. And my hopes is at the end of this session today, you're going to have some really good tips that you're going to be able to walk away with that help you to work a bit smarter and not harder. So, Liz, you've been a business advisor for many, many years, including doing some work with John Maxwell, which I thought that was very cool. So I'm excited to hear about that. And the part that really I was like, wow, like you homeschooling 4 children. That's quite a job all on its own. So we'll be excited to hear more about that. But some of what I learned about you just in your bio is you and your husband, have some courses and programs that really help people get time back in their schedule. And more than ever, I hear clients and friends talking about how fast time is going and how they feel like they just can't get enough done in a day. So timing of our conversation is perfect today. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to dig into it because I agree. I think this is something that all entrepreneurs are kind of sometimes silently, sometimes not so silently suffering from. And there are better ways to approach growth without having to sacrifice everything that matters most to you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's what got me excited about having you on the show today, because I think it's not just about entrepreneurs, but it's about anybody who's trying to get time back, right? Like sometimes we make things harder than it needs to be, but before we even get there, like let's just jump into what led you to today. So who is Liz?
Okay. Well, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So both of my parents, my dad has recently retired. My mom still runs her own business to this day. My grandparents both were small business owners, aunts, uncles. So I grew up working in all of their offices after school and in the summers. And that was just the world that I knew, small business, and just had a heartbeat for it. That was what I believed in. And what I found, though, is that they were all so incredibly good at what they did, but they were all completely capped in their time because they were all very much time for money. And as a result, they had flexibility, but they didn't have freedom. And I have a lot of memories growing up, being pretty young, 3, maybe 4 years old. My mom would be at everything. I mean, I was so blessed. She was the homeroom mom. She was driving us to and from school. She was there when we woke up and she was there tucking us in. She made us a fresh meal every night. She was at the dinner table. So she was always really present. But as the one providing for our family primarily and the one running the business, she had a lot of demands on her. So I have memories being really little, coming out of the bedroom to go use the bathroom at maybe midnight or 1 a.m. and seeing the dining room light on real dim and poking my head in and seeing my mom with her briefcase open and all her papers strewn across the table, because she had the flexibility to be present with us, but she didn't have the freedom because she wasn't earning when she was present with us. So she had to make up for that lost time. And for her, it wasn't lost time. She wouldn't have, I've had conversations with her about it. She's like, I wouldn't have traded it for the world. That was a sacrifice that was a blessing to our family and to her. But I also acknowledge, man, I really want to find a way to help these integrity-driven, family-oriented entrepreneurs be able to grow and scale in a way that they do have more freedom and they do experience prosperity, and they don't have to be working into their late 60s, early 70s if they don't want to. Because too, the heartbeat of all that we do at Luminary is with a heart for family, because we believe that behind every successful entrepreneur is a family that deserves more of them. So we wanted to create better systems and strategies and tools and just say, hey, this is what helped us scale and have the capacity to homeschool our kids, even if homeschooling is not for you, or even if you don't have kids. Translate it however you need to, whatever freedom looks like for you, because I know that we're all built really differently as entrepreneurs. We're called to this work that we do, but it doesn't have to be martyrdom How can we do it in a way that is inspired and opens the door to more possibility, not just a heaviness that can come with trying to grow?
Yeah, you said several things there. I'm like, my head's going, wow. So, that visual you painted of your mom late at night, she's got the briefcase spread out. Like, I'm talking to clients all the time, and it doesn't matter what age or stage they're in, that often is the case, right? And especially when you have young kids, because you're so in demand in all of their care. And so often clients will say to me, yeah, I put the kids to bed at 8, and then from 8 to midnight, I'm catching up on everything. And so I think what you've just described is a very normal North American work ethic. And oftentimes I think we believe that then that means we've put our day in, right? And
Right.
so that's why I was excited to talk to you about, how do we start to look at work differently and think about it from just from that smarter perspective. Like, how do you get time back?
Yeah. Well, I think the mistake is that a lot of entrepreneurs like me years ago have bad math. We think that hard work plus, time under our belt is going to ultimately equal freedom. But I have many family members that are evidence of the fact that that's not true. They've busted their butt harder than anybody I know. Decades have passed and they're still busting their butt harder than anybody I know because there was no plan for growth. So I don't think there's anything wrong with living in and out of seasons where you do work really, really hard. I still 12 years in, having scaled, have intentional seasons where like, okay, this is a growth season, or we're applying something new, or we're hiring more team and we got to onboard them, like whatever the dynamic might be, but it's planned for. It's not this perpetual hamster wheel of run, 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 and hope that someday we magically get off the hamster wheel and we have this magnificent business that has grown. It's just not how it works. I think a lot of people depend too heavily on the concept of the compound effect. And that's fine. You probably will grow some, but you will hit your cap. So it's that mentality of what got you here won't get you there. So I am a proponent of people working really hard, like putting in the hours. I also am a proponent of working really smart and saying, okay, are you evolving and changing and being strategic about how you're working versus just checking things off a list?
Yes.
And I think the first mistake a lot of people make is they work from a to-do list. So it's just this ever-growing list of tasks, and they feel satisfied because they're checking things off a list, and they're busy. They genuinely are busy. But if you were to measure the impact of those things that they're doing, it's very low leverage, right? It's like send the email gets received, but no big leap happens in the business. Post the social media thing or interact on social media, but it doesn't result in $100,000 of business, right? So what I like to help my leaders do is shift into high leverage moves. So this is something that we teach in our masterminds, but we also teach it in Your Breakthrough Year, which is our program that allows people to access our best systems and strategies and basically put them into their own business for growth. We teach how do you determine what are the moves that you could make each day, the actions you could take that have to happen first before you get to a task list, before you log into Slack and respond to your team or social media and respond to your audience. You're being proactive. You're not in response mode yet. And this is a leadership block of your day that starts the day, so that if your day goes off the rails, at least in your day, you did the most high leverage things. And what I mean by a high leverage move is you do this action and it creates an unproportionate big response. It's not just something where you do it and it's done. You do it and it creates this massive wave of momentum. It's usually the stuff you don't want to do. It's the stuff we kick the can down. Yeah, it's the stuff we avoid. It's usually scary. So it's things like sending the pitch, right? Like sending the proposal that could change the game for you. It's writing the book, if the book is the thing that's going to put you on the map. Like it's the big thing that is the thing that you keep dreaming about and saying someday about, but you're not actually doing the things each day to move you towards it. So that switch alone, people think yeah, but then my to-do list is like building up. Well, your to-do list isn't making you more money.
Yeah.
True leaders are being really strategic with their time. And a lot of people throw the word CEO around, and it really bugs me because I'm like, have you ever really talked to a CEO of like a Fortune 500? He's not living in a to-do list. He's not
Yeah.
responding to everything. If he's good at what he does, he's getting super strategic, and he's doing the things that only he can and should do for the health of the business, because the
Yeah.
health of the business is primary.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to spend just a moment on that. Um, so I was doing a women in leadership with a tech group a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that I was talking about from a leadership perspective, to your point, is leaders are not doing. They are not ticking off all the to-do list, the boxes. It's about being, right? And so what are you being? Are you being strategic? Are you being inspirational? Are you influencing? How are you leveraging? So I love what you're sharing there, Liz, because I think that's such an important mental flip from, thinking, oh yeah, I got to get this, and this done. And the doing does not allow you to be in the space that you want to be. Love that. Awesome.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I think too, something to remember that just builds off of what you were just saying is the idea of being, and realizing that if you're not just doing, someone else sometimes has to be doing. So you really need to have team to support you, even if you're in an early stage of business. It can be outsourcing something a couple hours a week and starting there, but you have to start looking at your time as leadership time and putting a higher value on it. So you might say, man, I can't afford to outsource someone to do X, Y, Z. And it's like, well, at some point you can't afford not to, because then it's falling on your plate. And I just feel like too, if you have a family, or if you have other areas of life that maybe are getting neglected in the pursuit of building your business, what's that worth to you, right? Like, what's that value to you? So realizing that maybe it's not just about scaling your business to the highest heights. Maybe it's about your health that you've been just totally ignoring for the last 10 years. Or maybe it's about your kids who you keep like from behind your phone telling them, just a minute, mommy needs to finish one more thing. Like, what is it for you? And putting a value on that, and freeing yourself up for the things that really are the needle moving things in all areas of your life. I look at in business, what are the things that are the high leverage things, or the needle moving things that you haven't had time or capacity for because you're just drowning in all the things, because there's a lot that goes into running a business. And the same is true at home. What's the little stuff that's taking your attention from those kids or from your spouse, because you got to get that laundry done, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, where if it were off your plate once a week, could you pour into your family a little bit more? And how do you value that? So starting to bring people around you, because nobody's really self-made, and the people that think they can just be superheroes and do it all themselves, they're going to get there a lot slower, if they get there at all, and they're going to be unhealthy and broken marriages and kids on devices, not connected to them, and they're going to wonder what the heck happened.
Well, and I think what you just described there is part of that epidemic we have across, especially North America, but globally, that burnout, right? Because we are trying to do everything and be there in every aspect. And to your point earlier, it's, what is the high value, right? And where do you want to be in those moments? So maybe talk a little bit about that, because you and your husband consciously chose to homeschool 4 kids. They're young, right? So how do you balance those responsibilities and, still have this successfully thriving business and manage to homeschool them and help them be thriving young people?
Well, we never thought we'd homeschool. The world's kind of made that choice for us, and we're forever grateful for it, because I don't think we'll ever go back. But we don't balance it. I will tell you that. We have embraced what we really want for our life. So the thing that we did first, before we sat down and said, okay, what's our plan for scalability to make this possible? We said, what's our life plan? Like, what are the non-negotiables that we feel super called to, that matter to us most, And then what do we need to do within our business to make that possible? So the way our business was running, let's say like 7, 8 years ago, homeschooling would have literally not been an option. We were so time for money. I was working, I don't know, like 90-hour weeks on a good week. It was chaotic. It was very time for money. It was just stressful. And so we knew changes had to come. And thankfully, we had already started implementing a lot of those changes because that's what we teach. But when we thought about that life plan, I know a lot of people will say things, I'll just use homeschool as an example, but it's certainly not universal. I know that not everybody wants to homeschool, but it's an easy one to rationalize. A lot of people will I regularly get messages on social media saying, oh my gosh, it must be nice. Like I would love to homeschool, but I just could never. And that's where I really push back because my husband and I are both very much like dreamers, probably to a fault. We've probably taken like 10 years off our parents' lives with the risks we've taken and the things we've done and the crazy that we are.
Yay,
but,
brilliant.
Yeah. To that, I say, okay, well, if homeschool is really important to you and you're saying like, oh, I would love to do that. That would be so important. Like, I hate the school system right now. I hate that I send my kids there most of their existence. I see a huge problem with the person that's not then drawing their line in the sand and saying, what do I need to strategically do to ensure that I do this thing that I say is so important to me? Because it's a guarantee for regret, right? Like it's a guarantee to look back on your life and be like, well, dang, like I said that was so important. And I didn't even try to make changes or take risks or sacrifice to make that thing happen. So we sat down and we said like, okay, the way things are going, like there's no freaking chance I'm sending our kids to school. It's just not happening. So homeschool is a non-negotiable. All right, what do we got to do to make this happen? Which meant there was a season of really ugly. It was long hours. It was like trying to get our sea legs because we didn't know what we were doing, both in the homeschooling side of things and in like making the business work. But we started to find our rhythm in it. And we started to see that when you are really hungry for something and you have almost like an obsession for it because you know it's the right thing for you, you know it's what you're being called to, there is going to be a resourcefulness in you that paves the path. Even if the path is like so wonky and ridiculous getting there and you go in circles and U-turns and detours and whatever, there is a path and you will make it happen. So for us with homeschool, I wouldn't say we balanced it. I would say it was pretty ugly in the beginning, but it was okay because we were like, this is what we choose. This is non-negotiable. So even if it looks ridiculous, we know we're in the right thing. We know we're doing it the right way. And we'll figure it out. We'll get better as we go. And we finally feel like, for the last couple of years, we're in a groove. We have an 8-year-old, 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and then we have a little baby, a 10-month-old. So we're technically only homeschooling 3 at the moment because my little one's just always on my hip. But it requires a level of willingness for adaptation.
Yeah.
Right. So like we have our plan in the day of how we want the day to go because we'll look at the week ahead. The same way I would advise someone in business and say, hey, your schedule is your barometer for whether you're actually pursuing the things you say matter. Right. So when we talk about, oh, I'm going to just put my head down, keep working, and I hope I get there someday, I would say, cool, show me your calendar and I'll tell you right away if you'll get there someday. So it became, we had our rhythms and we had our plan for how we were going to get there. But then we adapted based on the data we were receiving back when we thought that we would sit down in the morning and do like book work with our son and realize, oh my God, this kid is not going to sit there and just like read a book with us. We got to find a creative way. So we had our plan, but you tweak your way to victory. You do the same thing in business as you do in your home and you remove the expectation of balance. The other thing that we really embraced, because we have a heart for entrepreneurship, because I was raised literally in the offices of all my family members as they did business. And it's where I learned about integrity. It's where I learned about service. It's where I learned about marketing. It's where I learned how to talk to people. It's where I learned how to, set my goals and how to pursue them. And I learned about money. I was raised up in small business and I learned all my best lessons. So we also made our business a classroom. We don't have like super strict boundaries in our business. I do when I'm doing something like this, right? Like I'm recording, I've got 4 little kids. they'd be bouncing off the walls if they were in here with me. So I come down to the barn studio and I record. But when I'm up at the house, I've got a kid sitting next to me as I'm working. I'm explaining, like my son the other day, he's 8. He came down here. He learned how to shoot, cause I do a lot of content creation. I've got all my lights around me and my microphone. He learned how to set up the mic. He learned how to test my sound. He then sat with me when I was writing a sales copy and I was explaining the difference in subject lines and why some get bigger open rates and some don't. So they're learning skills that they can then take and apply in their lives. So we've kind of removed this expectation that it has to be clean lines and perfectly done. And, these boundaries, and mom has these perfect work hours. No, like it's all integrated. Sometimes they're homeschooling at the table while I'm getting back to some work. And then sometimes I am just totally unplugging from work and just being present with them. But you learn to just flex and adapt. And you really have the mentality that success in all areas of life is cumulative. It's not hitting the nail on the head the first time. And you just figure it out and you grow as you go.
Yeah. Wow. Terrific. Like so many good things you said there. And, I want to tap into a couple of those because I think the flexing is such an important conversation for many of us, right? It again, doesn't matter what industry you're in, because we think from a societal perspective, we need to be perfect. And there is none of us that are perfect. And you just demonstrated beautifully how to take that into a teaching moment, whether it's your kids, partner, anybody, right? That's around. Like you can turn it into that opportunity for people to take knowledge with them, which I love. And, Liz, I want to go back to that life plan. I think that like I've underlined that one like 3 times when you said it, because I think that is something that most of us forget to do. And I remember having a conversation with a young woman. This was a couple of years ago, and she had like just had it with her company, her job, like tired of being on the hamster wheel, to your comment earlier. And she resigned. And I said to her, I said, so what are you thinking? I said, you got a blank canvas now. So what does that look like? And her comment was, I was like, wow, because it was so raw. And she said, nobody's ever asked me that. And I would suspect it's the same when it comes to thinking about your life plan, because we just get in that autopilot and we just start going in a forward motion. And so what I've heard you say today is being very intentional and strategic with what your bigger plan is with your business, with your family, your values, like really sitting down, spending time talking to your family about what does that look like, and recognizing there'll be moments or seasons of maybe some pain or some growth, right? And when you think about that, like even think about the seasons, like we're in the fall season, all the leaves have just fallen, which means the earth's going to take a little bit of a rest, right? And so, picking those moments and times with your business to be able to do that, and with life, right? Like,
right.
So I think you've highlighted a number of things. And so I'm just going to go back to your getting that time back, working smarter. So one of the things you talked about is how to get, let's say, I think you mentioned 20 plus hours. So what are 2 things that people listening today could do to just get a little bit of time back?
Yeah. So the first one is systems. I am traditionally not a systems girl. It took many years and many, project managers and directors of operations in our company to finally convince me to do it, because they helped me create systems that worked for my visionary brain. So systems are key. Where I used to just get up and get into action, I now get up and I leverage the system that's going to save me the most time. So I'll give you an example. It stresses me out when I have to take multiple steps to get one thing done. Like I want to be able to just do the thing and move on. So when we were working in project management systems, where it would be, I have to click into the system, then I got to go to this tab to get into these and look at these tasks and then go over here. It was like, I'm just not doing this. So my director of operations said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a system that's going to make you way more efficient. So she created this space we use Asana. in my Asana, which I had been very resistant to fully using. And she said, it's going to be called Liz's Workspace. And it's literally the only place that you're going to go in this Asana. The rest of the team will leverage all the boards and we'll manage the projects. But every morning, I'm going to make sure that your Asana is your workspace is stacked with exactly what you need to do in the order in which you need to do it. And we, prior to that, deem in our meetings, what are the biggest needle moving things? So I have this block of time in the morning that I called my leadership zone. And that's not where I'm signing into Asana. I have a specific process. I'm happy to share it with your audience. It's called my Leaders Morning Checklist, where I do a lot of the things that help me take massive leaps in my life, both in business, but also in the life plan, right? In the pieces of my life that matter. So that time is dedicated to that. But then when I do sit down to do my work, I'm going into this workspace and my team has sorted through the things that are really only for me to do in the order of highest leverage. So one of the things that's getting me my time back is I'm removing any decision making. We lose hours upon hours to decision making when we sit down and say, I wonder what I'm going to work on. Or I said I'm going to focus on podcasts today, but I didn't have the titles outlined. I didn't have the podcast details. I hadn't done the research yet. So then I lose all these hours to this work that I have to then do, in this allotted time, instead of having that all prepped and ready and it's in my workspace and I sit down and I just hit the ground running. So having systems that really support you. Also, anything that you do over and over and over can either be systemized and then outsourced because you have an SOP for that can then be given to somebody else so that you're getting your own time back, or it can be something that you've systemized. Like, for example, if your rhythm is, I get a lot of inquiries, right, about people wanting to work with us or be on the podcast or speaking opportunities or whatever, like some things that come up with frequency or questions that we get from our clients. If I ever get the same question twice and I respond individually to that question 2 different times, I've doubled the amount of time I could have spent on one thing that I could have systemized, right? So something happens twice, it now becomes templated. It now exists in our workspaces as a templated email response or a templated tool that we can then just plug in and use, or a templated video that we had already created that we can send to that customer that explains XYZ, instead of me or my team member sitting down and writing the same email 10 times. The same is true for if you manage a team, it's not just about your time. You want to get their time back because you're paying for their time, right? So you want to get that time back because that's money. But the other thing that I've been doing over the last few months is, and that I swear I thought I'd never do it because I have strong feelings that in the wrong hands, it's going to ruin our world in many ways, but that's AI. I use AI every single day. And that is what has bought me 20 plus hours back in my weeks. The research that I used to do for podcasts that I would create, the content that I would create, the outlines for some of the content I'd create, the editing process on things, tweaking clients' websites, coming up with marketing strategies for my client, like stuff that was literally dozens of hours every week has now been consolidated into a process of how I use AI. Now, AI can actually work against you in time if you don't know the proper ways to leverage it and prompt it, which is why I put the prompts that I use to save me time in one place. I'm happy to pass it along if it's helpful. I put it in an ebook because it took me a couple months, to be totally honest, Vicki, of being like, I'm not using this freaking tool. It's taking me longer. Like I could write the blog post myself, but I had to learn how to train it and I had to learn how to talk with it and I had to learn the right prompts. And now it's like I spend 10 minutes in AI and I get about 5 hours of work I used to spend completed in that time. So I know it's not a comfort for everybody, but evolve, right? My theory is if you can use it with integrity, if you can keep the humanity in the work that you do, if you can, figure out how to systemize it in a way that it's going to give you what actually adds value to you or your clients or the people you serve, and you stay within those bounds, then you're crazy not to use it, because it's almost like saying, however many years ago, like, what's this Google thing? Like, I'm not using that. I'm going to pull that encyclopedia every time I have a question about something. Those people probably aren't still in business at this point. So it's a similar premise. You can use it for good, and you can use it to save you time. So that's where I save the most time. Is I use it for research. I use it for writing for me. I use it for outlining things for me. I use it for client services. I use it for everything.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that you highlighted a number of things, and you can use that no matter what you're doing, right? Whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in a corporate environment or healthcare or whatever, these are tools that you can use that do give you back time. Those were really great. And I'd love to include your ebook so that our audience can, access it. I think that's a really important give. And so if you are hesitant or you're a little bit nervous about AI, this might give you some comfort on how to use it. I would agree with you. I've been using it myself, and same thing. It saved me tons of time. And because I'm in school, I use the site.ai, SCITE, for research as well. And again, it would take hours and hours to even be able to Google all the research you need, and where AI can help you pull it up in literally seconds. So I think there is a lot of good. So Liz, phenomenal conversation. And you've shared a lot of really important aspects of helping people start to get back their time, but also to start to look at your life more holistically. And what are the values that you have set for yourself, and creating that life plan. So if people have questions, how would they find you?
So I'll share, before I forget, the ebook. So that's one way that you're technically connecting with me. So at luminaryleadershipco.com/chat GPT. And it's an entire, probably 50-page ebook with all the prompts that you could possibly need to leverage it for growth and a lot of time saving. And then I'm on Instagram. You can find me at Liz Hartke, ELIZHARTKE, and feel free to reach out there, or just come on over to our podcast, the Luminary Leadership Podcast, and we'd love to have you tune in. We're sharing stuff like this all the time.
Awesome. All right. We'll make sure that that ebook gets posted too, so that they can get access to it pretty quickly. So this has been phenomenal. And I love how you and your husband have created this world that is in alignment with who you are and how you see the future for your family, and how you're integrating the kids into the business already at such a young age. I think that's phenomenal. And so thank you for being a guest today and sharing your insight. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. We know you have a choice, and we're being listened to in 48 countries now, which we're thrilled and honored for that. So thank you for supporting Women in Leadership Talk. So Liz, any parting words you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Well, I so appreciate you having me on, Vicki, and I just love the work you're doing. And honestly, so much of the growth that's happened in our family and in our business, and really in the opportunities and the doors that have opened for us, have been by embracing, a lot of what you talk about, which is leadership. I think, yes, the systems are great. Tools like that ebook are going to be super helpful and get back your time, but make sure the time you get back is being leveraged for your growth and stepping into who you're called to be. Because if you're not at the level that you need to be in order to carry that dream out that you have, that's where we hit our ceiling. So embracing leadership, doing the right thing, and continuing that growth journey is going to be instrumental in reaching the levels of success that people are seeking.
Oh, beautiful parting words. Yes, you deserve it. You owe it to yourself to do that. So love that. So Liz, thank you again for being here today. And our audience, thank you. We'll see you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. And if you're curious about your own leadership, you can go on the Will Empowered website. That's 1L, willempowered.com, and take our free leadership quiz. It'll give you a lot of insight as to how you're showing up as a leader, and give you some tips on, how to support yourself in gaining that confidence to be the leader you want to be. So thank you again, everybody, and have a phenomenal day. And we'll see you on the next Will Talk podcast.